영제 첨부조던 힘이장 동네 문음 첨부는 감디었 바그런 한금 잔도 실물도 동바득제 잔라 기시험살 내제로 저링이 정금서 저거도 기시험로 일날만 이면 번조장랑 소란도 공대 동반법으로 신지로.
The supreme profound Dharma is rarely encountered in 100,000 eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate sentient beings, let us all, with sincere hearts, give rise to the truly unsurpassed and ultimate bodhicitta. We will continue our discussion on the Udāna Sūtra. Before we formally commence our study of the profound Udāna Sūtra, I would like to take a moment to bring something important to your attention here. Starting from today and continuing for approximately 1 full week, every single day before our scheduled class session, let us all recite the Wrathful Padmasambhava Sadhana together. This ritual is very short. After we finish reciting it, we'll see how many mantras to chant. Let's see how it goes. Your designated chant leader recites this sacred mantra, and starting from today, taking into consideration your own individual circumstances, you can decide how many mantras to recite based on your situation. At the very least, those of us listening to this teaching should recite the Wrathful Padmasambhava mantra 1,000 times. If you are at an intermediate level, recite it 10,000 times. For the highest level, 100,000 times is also fine. There is no time limit. But at the very least, for those of us attending the class, everyone should recite the Wrathful Padmasambhava mantra, which is also very short, at least 1,000 times. We plan to practice for 7 days. After that, we will determine if there are any other necessary arrangements that need to be made first. So now please allow me to begin reciting the complete lineage transmission.
Kornde tamchido do mane martika dangnyanle rikbachele nyambarzar rangin gor chapbo no marbojar chishani pa shayo jem kalamja oyomber ding zup tkram zan shega javni rachap umur tang kartam gyawal tsirta ji tchucher namr kala so iseme pon barvi chochum soncha chartaram be do ponjom bir kar sar tkar nirtang hontar Hong Tang Tar Ngim Changway Yes Gur Ngah Der Dong Sum Yojang Gar Namto de Gommitger Gar Arsigner Zinamo Bangawa de Hong Pat San Ngah Chata de Bai Varchu de Ti Hong Le Ger Chotong Uchup Kantum Ger Pami Mangam Tarting der Garden Yang Ruis Re Shimjong de Ti Nyensi tse nyinga batang chapar shoko samaya dia.
We will definitely start from tomorrow, the very next day. Everyone should recite a little before class each day. Normally, it is highly recommended that everyone should diligently practice this as well. When it comes to the intricate and profound practice of deity, I wonder how everyone is progressing in this aspect. We're pretty good at debate, discussion, and giving lectures. However, when it comes to the actual practical application of these concepts, we often find ourselves in a position where we are not entirely confident or certain. All right, moving on to our next topic, let's delve into our discussion on Udāna Sūtra.
Dagnit nganjo lendente dam tsap lena ganchi lanchin shamchulang de hermik tori konstore marko.
A bhikshu delights in caution and fears negligence. He frees himself from the grip of evil destinies, much like a powerful elephant slowly but surely emerging from a deep muddy swamp. Next, let's delve into and discuss the meaning of this verse. A bhikshu should value caution and avoid negligence. He should fear negligence because in this way he can rescue himself from evil destinies, just like an elephant coming out of a muddy swamp. As for this story, it is said to have taken place near Jetavana monastery, where there was a dense forest. In the forest there was a group of bhikshus and practitioners. They diligently practiced meditation. After diligently and deeply meditating, they attained truly extraordinary spiritual achievements. Later, the Buddha, the Enlightened One, led another group of devoted monks to the same quiet place where the previous group had practiced well. When the Venerable Buddha and these accompanying monks arrived, the resident monks, observing them from a considerable distance, then proceeded to respectfully welcome the Buddha and all his followers. At this time, the Buddha took both groups of monks to another location that was a little bit further away from here. On the way there, some incidents occurred. They observed several distinctly different and varied scenes. The very first thing was seeing a magnificent king's elephant, a truly grand sight, stuck in a deep swamp. Everyone tried every possible way to successfully rescue it completely from the murky swamp. Then, as they continued on their way, they eventually arrived at a particular location. A tree stood there. Oh, that's right. A really strong wind was actively blowing against the sturdy tree, you see, causing all its leaves and fruit to fall to the ground. This was indeed the second significant thing they observed. Subsequently, the third alarming development was that some extensive forests tragically caught fire. The fiercely raging flames relentlessly devoured all the magnificent trees. After passing through a few more places, they arrived at a peaceful pond and crystal-clear lake adorned with lotuses. There were beautiful flowers and green grass, and the scenery was absolutely very beautiful. After seeing all of this, then, the Buddha began to solemnly recite the following 6 profound verses. Starting from here, basically, the previous verses are all the same. Monks delight in caution and are afraid of negligence. The previous parts are basically the same. As for these 6 verses, the Buddha, on the spot, addressed each one according to the different scenes he saw. He began to speak after witnessing them. The first few have clear metaphors, while the last 1 or 2 do not have explicit metaphors. But mainly the profound and intricate metaphor of the beautiful lotus pond is often used to vividly illustrate the merits of liberation and the exhaustion of defilements and their magnificence. This is the main principle being explained. So, if we speak literally, starting from here, it seems as if the Buddha is speaking to the bhikkhus, indeed some of those being taught on the spot, because the retinue around the Buddha was bhikshus. But in fact, when it says bhikkhu here, it does not mean to exclude anyone other than bhikkhus. It also includes bhikkhunis, samaneras and samaneras, as well as upasakas and upasikas, and even others who do not have faith and so on. It's not that they are excluded. Everyone is included. For example, when the Buddha was present, Ananda, Subhuti, or upasakas and so on were there as well. When it is said in this way, the people nearby at that time could be included. Just like in the profound analects that we diligently study even now, at that particular historical time, it might very well have been esteemed individuals such as Zigong, Zhejiang, or indeed other dedicated disciples who were closely nearby. In fact, these teachings can be applied for generations to come. So here, when the Buddha told the bhikkhus on the spot, we should always be joyful, truly delighted, and certainly not negligent. The main point here is to thoroughly talk about the significant merits of vigilance. Because if one is vigilant, all virtuous roots will naturally and steadily increase and flourish. One will also stay away from all distractions and fears. Therefore, the merits of diligence in this world are truly excellent. The other day there was a vigilant person, and a story from the sutras was also mentioned. It was explained very well at the time. A case of vigilance from the sutras was cited. In fact, in the commentary on the Way of the Bodhisattva, there are many stories and cases about the merits of relying on mindfulness, awareness, and vigilance. There are also numerous teachings and scriptural proofs on this topic. So first we discuss the merits, and then we talk about fearing negligence. For a truly dedicated and committed practitioner, one must be afraid. Afraid of what exactly? Afraid that one's body and mind are not completely and utterly under their own control, completely indulging in wild and untamed, unrestrained and natural primal impulses. This is a truly frightening thing. Here the main point is to discuss its faults. If we often let our minds wander, go to often noisy, restless and bustling places and so on, and associate with improper people and go along with them in their ways, in the end our body and mind will be completely ruined. Ultimately, all our virtuous roots will be utterly destroyed. This is truly terrifying. So at the beginning of each verse it is said that one must understand the merits of vigilance. We should be extremely cautious in this regard, but just being cautious is not enough. We should rely on antidotes to distance ourselves from its negative aspects. When it comes to negligence, we must have a sense of fear. A good practitioner would think, oh, I can't do this, it's too frightening. When people see such behavior in others, or notice such behavior in themselves, they feel a sense of fear. Wow, if I continue like this, I might be doomed in this life and the next. So they become especially afraid. And when they are not negligent, they feel especially joyful. In these past few days, my own body and mind have been in a state of tranquility in every aspect. This is really good, and I feel a sense of joy within myself. These two sentences are very important. Next, we won't explain each one in detail. At the beginning of each verse, there are these two sentences. This is still very important. So in this important way, yes, then the third sentence truly begins here. Through our persistent, diligent, and dedicated daily practice, we ourselves should actively rescue ourselves from the terrible suffering of the hell realm, ghost realm, and animal realms. We should free ourselves from these three lower realms. Self-liberation means we should leave the three lower realms ourselves. We should attain a kind of liberation ourselves. At the very least, if we practice virtuous deeds before we die, we can be confident that we will not fall into the three lower realms. This is extremely important. If we use an analogy to explain this, it is very much like the majestic elephant belonging to King Prasenajit during that particular period, which found itself deeply stuck within a muddy swamp. As is widely known and understood that swamps are inherently characterized by their extremely soft, yielding, and often inescapable terrain. And with any movement, you immediately sink deeper, sinking further and further down. Even now, we often see some animals that have already fallen into swamps, and this phenomenon is quite common. So, using this as a metaphor, it refers to the elephant, which appears to be an elephant, but in reality it represents the negligent person. In the end, they all end up drowning in the sea of suffering, and it's very hard to extricate themselves. In some other scriptures, it is also said that when the Buddha was at Jetavana monastery, King Prasenajit had a war elephant. A war elephant was used in battle, just like in modern warfare, with powerful tanks, advanced drones, and devastating artillery shells, all sorts of mechanized equipment used in combat. Back then, every country had elephants. Among the elephants, some were like wish-fulfilling jewels, elephants that increased one's merit and fortune. Some, on the other hand, were specifically used for warfare. King Prasenajit's war elephant. Later, it accidentally got deeply stuck in a treacherous swamp. When the massive object began to slowly sink further into the mire, the king immediately dispatched a formidable force of 1,000 people to pull it out. But it was always very difficult. They even had to find other elephants to help pull it out. It's just like nowadays when some vehicles get stuck on the road, just like using other vehicles to tow it out. They used other elephants to pull as well, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't move it. At this point, they encountered a wise person. This person asked, "What are you doing?" They replied, "The king's elephant has sunk, and we're trying to figure out a way to get it out." In the end, he said, "I have an idea. You might not be able to get it out this way. It would be best if you used a kind of detailed simulation and meticulously prepared for the upcoming battle, with everyone else fully and completely armed, ready for action, just like soldiers. Then when you go into battle, whether it's the rhythmic beating of drums or the resonant striking of gongs, make it a truly very solemn and significant ceremony. In this way, maybe there will be a solution." Later, they all followed this person's suggestion. All the brave soldiers were fully armed and prepared, and then everyone, filled with immense momentum and great enthusiasm, started vigorously beating their drums and loudly blowing their horns, creating a powerful and inspiring sound. Just like the old days when the military horn sounded, they had military horns, just these things. Then at that moment, as they heard these sounds and saw these scenes, the war elephant just mentioned still had some habitual tendencies in its continuum. These tendencies were immediately triggered. Once triggered, it became motivated and vigorous and instantly started to leap out of the mire. Then it had already come up and it was fine. So sometimes animals also have such interesting habits and behaviors. At this point, the king was very pleased. He heard about this wise person, who became a prominent minister in the court of King Prasenajit. Later, the venerable bhikkhus reflected upon this matter. They contemplated that even for sentient beings such as majestic elephants, escaping from the deep and treacherous mire of worldly existence, by relying on a special method. Once their inner strength is enhanced, they naturally and effortlessly leap out. So, as human beings, we can observe this. In the mire of samsara within the three realms, why is it that through practicing virtuous deeds, we cannot truly attain liberation? This is precisely how they deeply contemplated. Later, after the Buddha became fully aware of the entire situation, because these particular people, through such diligent contemplation, many of them attained the fruits of sainthood. In direct response to this situation, the Buddha compassionately spoke this verse. Therefore, whether dedicated monks or sincere lay practitioners, one must cherish vigilance and not be negligent. Through diligence and vigilance, we will find a definite way to attain liberation from the lower realms. This particular point is also extremely important. This is the first analogy. Next, I have to recite in Tibetan. There's no other way. I have to look at both the Tibetan and the Chinese texts. This is a bit difficult.
Gerlong lagaja vermit balan jikta ve dig bechurnum chikbrship chirship chirship longer join xiang loma visions
Monks truly delight in vigilance and deeply fear negligence. They can effectively destroy all evil dharmas, much like the strong wind blows down all the leaves from a tree. Therefore, there's no real need to explain the first two lines here. They were already explained earlier. They can destroy all evil dharmas like the wind blows down leaves from a tree. This should be clear. By using wisdom to destroy evil dharmas, it's just like when a strong and powerful wind blows with considerable force, the already loose and fully mature leaves inevitably start to detach and fall off, and that is precisely the meaning being conveyed here. So regarding this, at that particular time, the Buddha was most probably residing in the ancient country of Magadha, in the midst of a very dense forest nearby. There were some bhikkhus. These devout bhikkhus were diligently practicing their spiritual disciplines there. While they were practicing, because the surrounding trees were especially dense and overgrown, all the leaves as well as the branches and trunks were all extremely close together, in very tight proximity. At this particular time, many opportunistic bandits took full advantage of the chaotic situation and would often intimidate these monastics or harass these dedicated monastics. They subsequently encountered an amount of trouble and difficulty. Then, when autumn came, gradually the beautiful leaves started to gently fall off, bit by bit, from the branches. Because the trees became more sparse inside, when the landscape was sparse and open, those bandits had absolutely nowhere to hide. In this way, there were basically no more bandits to trouble the local populace. With the absence of these troublesome bandits, the monks later reflected deeply upon their experiences. They contemplated, actually, our own physical bodies are very much like these dense, overgrown trees. When they are especially dense and thick with foliage, including our attachment to our own bodies, to our hair, to our hairpins, when we are particularly, especially attached to these things, it's just like a thick, lush forest. Then, when autumn season eventually comes, the magnificent trees become quite sparse. That is to say, when our dedicated practice is going exceptionally well, these afflictions also have nowhere to take hold. So, in fact, many of the noticeable seasonal changes that occur between the vibrant warmth of summer and the crisp, colorful arrival of autumn in the natural world outside can also symbolize a deeper, more intricate kind of inner meaning. In other words, if we are not negligent, remain vigilant and attentive in our hearts, it's just like autumn. Thieves will disappear without a trace. But if we are especially attached to our entire body and mind, if we are particularly and intensely obsessed, it's truly like a dense summer forest, bringing many harmful afflictions and giving them ample opportunities to arise. Then, through this kind of deep reflection, diligently practicing, they cut off the afflictions of the three realms and ultimately attain the holy fruit, because they realized that this is also a particularly frightening thing. These things rob us within our own mental continuum of the wealth of virtuous qualities. By being content with very little, diligently reducing their worldly desires, going on alms rounds for sustenance, and assiduously practicing in complete solitude, they fully attain the holy fruit of enlightenment. For this significant reason, the Buddha spoke this particular verse. The essential meaning is that, as dedicated practitioners, we must be extremely cautious and value caution. Among people, there may be two types of individuals. One type is those whose habitual tendencies from past lives are relatively good. This includes both monastics and lay people. Their faculties are relatively gentle and not so unruly. Then there are some people who may have been barbarians in their past lives, or perhaps wild, untamed elephants. In this life, their six senses are very difficult to tame. But we should find ways to gradually train ourselves little by little. If we used to be especially disobedient or particularly mischievous, or especially stubborn and hard to transform, we should rely on the teachings of the Buddha and the instructions of the great masters of the past, as well as the guidance from our own teachers and so on. When the right conditions come together, everyone, just like those wild elephants, can be tamed to become especially obedient. In that case, since we are human after all, if we rely on some virtuous teachers, our own minds will definitely become more and more gentle over time. As for the methods of taming, it is through wisdom that we cut off. Cut off what exactly? Here it says, destroy all negative actions. As for negative actions here, it refers to things like killing, stealing, and so on. All sorts of negative actions, mainly the 10 non-virtuous deeds. These negative actions, through the profound and insightful path of seeing and path of meditation, we can effectively eliminate all unwholesome thoughts and detrimental behaviors. In other words, if we diligently cultivate and develop this profound wisdom deep within our mind streams, we can eliminate these negative actions from our lives and conduct gradually and effectively. These negative actions will become much easier to completely abandon. So what is this like? It's just like when a really strong wind blows, the loosened, fully mature autumn leaves will naturally fall to the ground. In the same way, within our own mind streams, whether it's deep-seated afflictions or persistent heedlessness, or indeed all sorts of negative and detrimental habits, they truly require long-term and sustained antidotes. By relying on such antidotes, we can abandon these afflictions. Here the main focus is on the afflictions of the desire realm. The commentary says that the following verse refers to the form and formless realms. Here, if you practice with great diligence and without any negligence, through your long-term practice, these afflictions in the desire realm, because the afflictions in the desire realm, according to the Abhidharmakosha and the ornament of clear realization, can also be divided into many types, including those eliminated through cultivation and those eliminated through insight. These dharmas are further classified into higher, middle, and lower grades, and so on. There are many ways to categorize them, but regardless of the classification, he doesn't go into much detail here either. The main point is that if you practice well, you should be able to eliminate the afflictions of the desire realm. So once the afflictions are eliminated, we are not like the non-Buddhists. For non-Buddhists, after some afflictions are eliminated, after a period of time, they start to resurface and come back again. However, in the profound teachings of Buddhism, the situation is not quite like this at all. Once they are eliminated, they never resurface again. It's like when a leaf is cut off from a tree. It is impossible for the tree to grow again by relying on that leaf. So this is how it should be understood from this perspective. In fact, when it comes to external circumstances and internal afflictions, in the process of battling them, if you eliminate them at the root, they will not grow back again. Therefore, if you want to eliminate them, you cannot do so without being constantly vigilant and extremely diligent always. Next, monks delight in vigilance and are fearful of negligence. They can extinguish both coarse and subtle fetters, just as fire burns a forest to ashes. These two lines are the same as the previous ones mentioned earlier. As for what follows, if one relies on the fire of wisdom, or uses wisdom to extinguish, what does it extinguish? It extinguishes both the coarse and subtle fetters. The 9 kinds of fetters, the 9 kinds of afflictions. If that's the case, it's just like a raging fire burning intensely and consuming an entire vast forest. So, in actual fact, because these cases were basically explained all at once earlier, and the commentary doesn't elaborate much on them either. The main point here is what exactly is cut off through wisdom. It is the cutting off of both the coarse and the subtle. Coarse refers to, in the form realm, the obstacles of the first dhyana, and as for the subtle, those of the second dhyana and above. Of course, when comparing the first dhyana to the second dhyana is more subtle. When comparing the second dhyana to the third dhyana is more subtle. Comparing the third dhyana to the fourth dhyana, the third dhyana is coarse, while the fourth dhyana is subtle. We can also include the formless realm, such as the sphere of infinite consciousness and the sphere of infinite space, all the way up to the state between neither perception nor non-perception and the peak of existence. Here too, the earlier stages are considered coarse, and the higher stages are considered subtle. So when these are cut off, in fact, this knot, as many scriptures also state, only after severing the 9 knots can one attain liberation. Therefore, these 9 knots, through the method of antidotes, can give rise to the fire of undefiled wisdom. Relying on the fire of undefiled wisdom, just like a raging fire, devours an entire vast forest, all of these destructive things that can be completely eliminated. So here we have a solution. We see that if we rely on vigilance and practice well, then the afflictions within our own mental continuum, the numerous obstacles and challenges of the 3 realms, these can also be utterly eliminated. Of course, if one is a master well versed in the Tripitaka, thoroughly versed in all the sacred texts of the Tripitaka, then there is certainly no problem whatsoever. It's just that there is concern that some masters well versed in the Tripitaka, if they later do not practice well, they may fall into degeneration. Such situations do occur. Even if one is not so thoroughly versed in all the Tripitaka, but in fact if one practices well, there is also the opportunity for liberation. There is also the possibility of destroying the causes and conditions of the knots of the 3 realms. In the past, there was a disciple of Elder Master Shuyun named Monk Juxing. This Monk Juxing was rather dull-witted. He couldn't even recognize a single character. He was illiterate. But he practiced the Pure Land teachings with great diligence. In particular, he was devoted to the practices of Avalokiteshvara and Amitabha Buddha, reciting Amitabha Buddha's name every day. However, his characteristic was that he was unwilling to interact with many people. He didn't like to talk and pretended not to listen either. He acted deaf and mute, as if he couldn't really hear. Many people called him the deaf monk. He pretended not to hear anything. Actually, let me talk more about this later. He acted as if he couldn't hear at all. Later on at that time, Elder Master Suyun was there, probably at Yonki Temple, overseeing renovations. During the renovation process, Monk Juxing was especially diligent. He worked alongside the Elder Master, whether it was carrying stones, fetching water, digging earth, or building walls. He did everything, every single task. But during the process of working, he often remained within his own state, whether reciting the Buddha's name or not. He would do hard labor while never leaving his practice. His mouth never stopped reciting, and his mind never left Amitabha Buddha. After the entire temple was renovated, Elder Master Shuyun, because he built many pagodas, lived to be 120 years old. He also restored many temples, and then he built a pagoda called Haihui Pagoda, a Buddhist stupa. During the construction process, Monk Juxing was also especially willing to participate, but he still didn't talk to others. Later, he spoke to Elder Master Shuyun. "After you finish building the pagoda, may I be the one to guard it?" At that time, the Elder Master understood his intention. He agreed, and after agreeing, some time passed after the construction was completed. One particular night, the local people residing at the very foot of the majestic mountain distinctly noticed that there was a brilliant, ethereal white glow emanating powerfully all around the pagoda. Some of the light beams shot straight into the clouds. At that moment, when everyone looked intently, they saw that the venerable Monk Juxing was positioned directly beneath the pagoda, wearing his traditional kasaya and devoutly facing towards the west, and sitting quietly in meditation, passing away in peace. After this, the Elder Master also bowed to him in respect. He said that he had truly severed all fetters and attained the fruition of a great arhat. Although it was said to be the great arhat fruition, no one really knew exactly what it was like. Many people, because of his realization and the signs of his accomplishment, were deeply moved. Such things happened. So from this we can also see that it seems if we want to burn away all the obstacles within our own continuum, does it mean that only someone extremely wise can do it? Not necessarily. Since ancient times, regardless of whether it's Tibetan Buddhism or Chinese Buddhism, if you look at any Buddhist case, in fact, those who are especially diligent tend to be more successful in their practice in the end. Because as mentioned earlier, this practitioner was actually illiterate. He couldn't read and had no educational background at all. He probably didn't understand logic, didn't know Abhidharma, nor did he understand the great illusory net or the sutras and tantras. We often say that the main teachings of the Nyingma school are the sutra, the illusion, and the mind. The sutra specifically refers to the highly revered Guyagarbha Tantra, which contains exactly 75 distinct chapters. The illusion clearly refers to the profound, great illusory net. As for the mind, it mainly refers to the 18 sections of Dzogchen Mind Series Mother and Child Tantras in the biography of Khenpo Sodargye. The main deity of all the Nyingma Sutra, illusion, and mind teachings is Rimati. Rimati is the goddess Sri Devi, our auspicious goddess. Now, the Gelugpa sect and many other Buddhist traditions is a bit. Logically speaking, this deity is primarily associated with the Nyingma school. It was Songtsen Gampo who originally invited this figure. The biography of Khenpo Acho also mentioned it. In Mifam Rinpoche's writings, there are also her evocative verses. There are also some of more extensive and profound praises and lyrical verses, which truly capture her essence. Therefore, those who practice Dzogchen, who practice the Tantric Great Illusion net, in fact, the auspicious goddess, the auspicious lady, her offerings and praises are also quite important. Of course, everyone's situation may be different. Actually, in the 17th chapter of the Golden Light Sutra, within this document there is a section specifically detailing the auspicious goddess. Judging from some of her sacred scriptures and texts, it becomes clear that the content should also be quite similar. Just now I don't know what I was talking about. Maybe one's practice does not necessarily mean mastery of the sutras, illusions, and mind, but actually some truly honest and sincere practitioners, when they pass away, really show signs of accomplishment. In fact, in this brief life, perhaps the most important thing for us is to attain an accomplishment, to achieve liberation. That might be very important. When everyone is young, their goals are all different. Some people might think, oh, I can spread the Dharma and benefit sentient beings. I am famous, I am wealthy. I live a very happy life myself. Now, even among some Khenpos and Dharma teachers, there seem to be people who enjoy comfort. Sometimes I notice that some people who have been teaching the Dharma here for a long time, as soon as they have a bit of free time, just a little, like last year when all sorts of things happened, some Dharma teachers seem to take it pretty easy. Usually, teaching the Dharma here is a bit tiring, so they immediately look for a quieter place to have a good rest. It seems like they always feel that something is weighing them down, a constant sense of exhaustion. Actually, for a Mahayana Dharma teacher, if they have this kind of mindset, it's really not good at all. Just like that monk I mentioned earlier, Jyoksing. He didn't have much background in studying Mahayana Buddhist teachings, but his own practice was still very good. He would dedicate his merits for the benefit of all sentient beings. So for us, including what I've learned recently among some Khenpos and Khenmos, the Khenmos classes are still ongoing, right? But I heard that some Khenpos during the summer, originally our academy only had a little over 10 days of vacation this year. And there was some time for leisure activities, but it seems like some people deliberately took time off just to have fun on their own. I'm not talking about people from your side, but some of them seem to be a bit scattered and unfocused. So we've also been looking into this recently. I hope that none of you will. Our academy currently faces this situation, as long as, whether the men or the women monastics, it seems that if the time spent playing is a bit longer, everyone is happy. But if the time spent studying is a bit longer, no one is particularly happy about it. Actually, if things go on like this, if none of you have any self-discipline, you might find attending classes very tiring, but teaching the classes is just as exhausting for us. If there isn't any, then because of the Buddhist teachings, The merit of listening to Dharma teachings and the benefits of teaching the Dharma are immense. As I have mentioned before, after the parinirvana of His Holiness, if none of us said a single word, no one would force you to teach. But if you do teach, you have to prepare lessons, worry, and look after your followers, and deal with all sorts of things. But when we weigh the pros and cons, wow, even though I'm a bit tired myself, the meaning behind this exhaustion is much greater. I actually feel very happy about it. At the beginning of this year, I didn't have many classes here. It felt like I was just staying in the academy all day long, and it seemed especially meaningless. Even the merit from reciting the King of Aspiration prayers couldn't be obtained. Of course, I could recite it on my own, but if I practice by myself, it often doesn't go very well. For example, every day I have to recite the short scripture we recite for half an hour each day. But if we don't study together as a group, maybe you all wouldn't necessarily do it either. Look, yesterday was Sunday, and there were no classes for everyone. But I can guarantee that probably each person didn't recite the King of Aspiration prayers. In just 1 or 2 short hours, everyone probably let the time slip by without even noticing. So people always need a kind of self-discipline. If you want to have self-discipline, you must join a class. So study together with everyone. So here we've also been looking into this recently. We hope that in the future, during study time, no one will use all sorts of excuses, like saying it's too hot, we have time off. In winter, it's too cold to study. Come spring, I'm too sleepy to function properly. Either way, it looks like we need some time off. Or in autumn, the wind is too strong, so that's not possible either. So you see, winter is very cold, summer is especially hot, spring makes us particularly drowsy and we feel weak. And every day the weather is different. Today the sun is too strong, it's uncomfortable, so we skip class. Tomorrow there will be all kinds of other reasons. People can come up with all sorts of reasons. But in the long run, this isn't really reasonable. So no matter what problems we encounter, we can adjust our methods and approaches. Sometimes we have no choice but to adjust our methods. It's okay to make adjustments. But the system of study itself shouldn't be changed at will. No one has the right to do that. I hope that our Khenpos and Khenmos won't arbitrarily, because of their own bad habits, start changing the entire framework, schedule, or methods of study. These things are unnecessary. It's truly rare for everyone to study together like this. No matter if there are many people or just a few, it's precious to voluntarily come together to study. That's why the Buddha also spoke about this here. He told us not to be too careless and that we should have a sense of caution. If we continue diligently on this path over a period of time, the various afflictions and negative mental states that reside within our mind streams can be eliminated. This understanding is precisely the core meaning being conveyed here. Following this, it says, a bhikshu delights in vigilance and fears carelessness. He can progressively eliminate all worldly bonds and gradually attain a profound state of complete realization. So what this truly means is, yes, it is indeed the very same fundamental principle as what was comprehensively mentioned and explained earlier. Subsequently, by consistently and diligently relying on profound wisdom, one can eliminate the bonds and afflictions. This is the same as the 9 types of bonds discussed earlier. In this way, step by step, one gradually and sequentially attains realization. As for this, at that particular time the revered Buddha was likely residing within a secluded cave in the ancient land of Magadha. At that particular time the bhikshus went out from their monastery to humbly beg for alms. As they proceeded along the road, they encountered the king, who demanded that they pay taxes. After they finished collecting the taxes, they turned them over to the national treasury. At this time, the bhikshus also thought, actually these people, through this process, after the king required everyone to enforce the law and collect taxes, the money was deposited into the national treasury. We practitioners are the same way. After the Buddha taught these dharmas to sentient beings, if we do not accept them, we are not even as good as some worldly rules. Therefore, what the Buddha taught, whether it's the 4 foundations of mindfulness or the 4 right efforts, as well as the 5 faculties and the 5 powers, which we often talk about, these dharmas among the 37 aids to enlightenment should be practiced, and should be practiced step by step, ultimately eliminating afflictions. After this, the Buddha, in response to this matter, also spoke this profound verse. So here it clearly states, if a venerable bhikshu truly delights in being extremely cautious and genuinely fears any form of negligence, then relying on this he will attain realization. Attaining realization here refers to the wisdom of exhaustion, Jinji. In the Abhidharma Kosha, there is wisdom of non-arising and the wisdom of exhaustion. This is the wisdom that comes when all afflictions have been exhausted. It can destroy all fetters. These fetters come in various sizes, both great and small. Then gradually, the larger ones are destroyed first, and then little by little the smaller ones, and finally the subtlest ones. Once even the subtlest have been destroyed, realization is attained. Here the Buddha has already spoken about a sequential method of practice. Sequential practice is also very important for us. We often see many people first practice the preliminaries, starting with some foundational teachings, and then move on to the deeper ones, including Dzogchen, Mahamudra, and so on. This approach is better, but for some the rules are exactly the opposite. They first receive the highest empowerment, and then they don't need to practice any preliminaries at all, but instead start directly from the highest and work their way down. This kind of practice sequence is a bit chaotic. It's impossible to truly attain realization this way. So according to the Buddha's teachings, in fact, practicing according to this sequence is extremely beneficial for our spiritual development. Moreover, this kind of sequence is very suitable for most people. Of course, there are very few who attain sudden enlightenment. Like the sixth patriarch, those rare individuals with especially exceptional faculties. But after all, these are special cases. Therefore, one should practice step by step in sequence. Next, let's talk about this. Monks delight in caution and are afraid of negligence. They extinguish all formations and abide in tranquility, each attaining the fruit of peace. This mainly refers to some monks who seem to have practiced for a long time, but in the end do not attain any spiritual result. If they start to feel a bit weary, in order to guide them, the Buddha also spoke this verse. Earlier, there were a few metaphors mentioned. The previous verse and these, as well as the beautiful garden mentioned later in the story, are explained using these symbols. What this means is, if a dedicated monk is not negligent in his duties and is genuinely afraid of any form of negligence or oversight, then he is truly on the right path and relies on his wisdom of non-arising. The wisdom of non-arising should be mentioned below, if I remember correctly. This also means relying on a certain kind of wisdom to cut off what exactly? The cessation of all formations. Actually, formations refers to the actions we rely on. Formations here means taking rebirth. It is the aggregates that keep cycling continuously. This is what formations means. When all formations are extinguished, then one attains tranquility. If one attains tranquility, it means destroying samsara through the flame that extinguishes all formations. That is the meaning here. Each attains it, each realizes it individually. One transcends birth and death oneself. This is called tranquility. Here, there are two kinds of tranquility mentioned. The commentary explains them with some slight differences. As for the latter one, it refers to the profound and ultimate attainment of the fruition of both nirvana with remainder and indeed nirvana without remainder. So in this particular case, actually, yes, one has truly attained such a significant and complete fruition. Next, it says, monks delight in vigilance and are afraid of negligence. Because they are very close to the state of nirvana, they are firmly determined not to regress. This particular point mainly talks about how some practitioners, although they practice, are worried that they might regress later on. So if they develop weariness from these concerns, in order to properly guide them, this important teaching is being given. As for the previous two verses, their meaning is the same as before. And here the meaning is that being close to nirvana mainly refers to approaching nirvana. The body has not yet completely disappeared. This refers to nirvana with remainder. So for those who are approaching nirvana with remainder, in fact, they are also definitely not going to regress. If one cannot regress after attaining nirvana with remainder, then there is even less need to mention nirvana without remainder. Because they have already attained the wisdom of non-arising, it is impossible for them to have any chance of falling back into the cycle of rebirth within the three realms. Therefore, in the Buddhist scriptures, when one attains the final holy fruit, that is, the ultimate result, it is said that there is absolutely no possibility of returning to the cycle of rebirth. Such a thing does not exist. Therefore, generally speaking, once one has attained the ultimate fruit, it is impossible to be reborn in the cycle of samsara. This is something that is fundamentally impossible, absolutely out of the question. So, when we talk about never regressing in the end, not regressing should mean having attained the state of arhatship, where all the habitual tendencies and afflictions of the three realms of samsara have already been completely eliminated, and all such distractions have been entirely cut off. That is precisely what this truly signifies and implies.
Zunji danjiang varyo tang chushu de lagbar chushe pa jikten de tang parur de chushe pa yi deva top.
Next it says, possesses. Right, at this point, perhaps we don't know exactly what it was at the time. It seems like it was quite a major mistake. Diligence with right mindfulness should actually be diligence without negligence. I've always wondered why it was written as diligence with right mindfulness. Sometimes when translating, it's really like that. You look at it and don't even notice such a big mistake. So it should be diligence without negligence. Diligence without negligence, those who practice virtue and dharma, will truly attain profound happiness in both this present life and the eternal life to come through their diligent practice. This mainly talks about the crucial importance of diligence without any form of negligence. For those who do good deeds and practice the Dharma, whether in this life or the next, on one hand, they are practicing the Dharma, and on the other hand, they attain this profound and lasting kind of happiness, a state of deep contentment and inner peace. At that significant time, one day, a celestial being, a deva, came to respectfully ask the Buddha for his invaluable wisdom and guidance. In this complex and often challenging world, what kind of dharma is beneficial for this life, and also beneficial for the next life, bringing happiness? What exactly is it truly like? He thoughtfully asked this particular question. And when he asked this question, the Buddha began to expound this verse. Actually, the question raised by this deva was very appropriate. The Buddha also explained this. So I think everyone should memorize this verse, whether in Tibetan or Chinese. I hope you all memorize it. The other day I met a few people, and they said that now with the Udāna Sūtra, they recite it every day, following my pace. They haven't missed a single day and have memorized the whole thing. When I saw that this volume was finished, there were some who were willing, whether memorizing in Chinese is fine or memorizing in Tibetan is also fine. There are only a few people who memorize in Tibetan. The other day someone made a vow saying, but when it comes to memorizing, maybe they haven't memorized that much yet. Maybe just the first 2 or 3 chapters. But I noticed that some people who memorize in Chinese said that memorizing this is very easy. They said memorizing 7 verses a day is no problem at all. In the past, the great masters used to memorize 15 long passages. If you can't even memorize that much in a day, then you're not really someone who studies and contemplates the teachings. Not all of these are their exact words, but I added a few myself. But this is basically what it means. The meaning is just as I said. I am explaining their intended meaning. So these verses are actually very important. Truly everyone, in fact every single verse is very important. Originally I wanted to talk more about this chapter on heedfulness, to explain some of the verses in greater detail. But that day some people also said it's okay to cover a little less. Plus, if there are some important points, we can spend more time studying them, especially when looking at the commentary. Sometimes everyone feels that there's too much explanation, and it gets a bit tiring to go through the commentary. So it's very important to carefully compare the commentary with the meaning in detail. This is very important. So I think this verse is extremely important. As dedicated practitioners, we must always be diligent and truly committed. We should strive to get up early in the morning and go to bed late at night, and genuinely love and embrace virtuous deeds and actions. Diligence itself is exactly this meaning. Then regarding non-negligence, it must be just as we discussed earlier, having a sense of caution in our body, speech and mind, especially when it comes to practicing virtuous actions with a careful mindset and behavior. As for practicing virtuous deeds, we need to engage in virtuous actions and stay away from all acts like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and so on, and try our best to avoid all offenses prohibited by the Buddha and natural misdeeds. then diligently practice the Dharma yourself. If you are only diligent, some people are indeed very diligent, but if this diligence is like that, in reality it's diligence without any real meaning. For example, worldly people are extremely, extremely diligent, truly leaving early and returning late, putting great effort into everything. But some of these things are completely meaningless. Some things may temporarily benefit one's basic needs, livelihood, or work in this life, and have some meaning, but they have no significance for the next life at all. Some things might help one be reborn in heaven in the next life, and these have a bit of meaning. But even in this life, they are not beneficial. There are all sorts of things like this. Therefore, we need to be diligent to avoid negligence and to practice the true Dharma. In this way, our actions will have real meaning both in this life and the next. For those of us who truly practice Mahayana Buddhism, we are certainly not boasting about ourselves in any way, but honestly, we are truly very fortunate. It may indeed seem that what we eat and where we live are not particularly special or luxurious. It might appear that we are not the happiest people in the world, those who seem to be the happiest in the world, those with the most power, or celebrities and the like. But in reality, it seems that nowadays, celebrities are not the most admired individuals anymore. Recently, in many bustling cities, in all the airports and train stations that used to be completely filled with people, with all kinds of celebrity posters and portraits, showing how they styled their hair, how white their teeth were, and so on, these huge images. Now there are new requirements, and it seems the direction has shifted a bit. They say there should be scientists and the like instead, but maybe that's just temporary. Because for most young people, when you mention scientists or writers, no one is interested in listening. Some even don't want to hear the name Confucius mentioned. People just don't want to hear it. So in this world, just like we talked about the other day, many people's attention is currently focused and concentrated at this moment on rather superficial academic matters. So in this way, it seems that the overall level of human society keeps steadily declining. Our goals are getting simpler and simpler, and everyone is just completely focused on pure entertainment. Nothing else really matters. They're not really delving into any of the classical texts. Some temples are like this as well. If you know about worldly news or all sorts of worldly knowledge, if you understand these things, people think you're quite impressive. But when it comes to deeply studying the scriptures and treatises, they don't really value that. There are places like this too. Actually, for ordinary people, this is understandable. But for us as a Buddhist center, the most fundamental thing is that perhaps in your heart you truly need to have the Dharma and to practice it. After practicing, you will eventually truly taste the Dharma for yourself. Its incredible greatness and unimaginable peace. At that point, even if you wanted to let go, you might not be able to. Look at the many great masters during the Cultural Revolution. It was such a dangerous and troublesome time, yet they quietly practiced on their own and quietly transmitted the Dharma to others. This is what was in their hearts. It's a very firm and unwavering conviction, such an absolute certainty. So what exactly are we talking about here in this particular context? If there is happiness in this life and the next, it is because of the Dharma. Indeed, this statement is something everyone should remember well, really remember. We can also put it this way. Buddhism is now extremely, extremely important. It is very important for people in today's world, and it will also be very important for people in the future world. Young people need it, and so do the elderly. Monastics need it, and so do lay people. If we don't have this, even if people have a lot of external wealth, fame, and status, or all kinds of fleeting worldly titles, whether they be prestigious accolades or esteemed positions, it doesn't signify profound importance. So, considering this perspective, shouldn't we at times reflect upon what genuinely matters? Shouldn't we still cultivate some Dharma in our hearts, to gain a little bit, not to say anything extraordinary, like the path of seeing or meditation, reaching the state of a first stage bodhisattva might be a bit difficult, but at the very least, our own mental continuum should mature a little. We should strive to attain this profound kind of wisdom and boundless compassion. Back in the historical Qing dynasty, in one particular place, there was a rather shabby, dilapidated house situated directly under a bridge. Inside this house lived a beggar. This beggar was a believer in Buddhism. Every day when he went out, he would recite sutras as he walked. He often recited the Heart Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra. He would quietly recite the Heart Sutra as he walked along the road. He begged in silence, and while begging, as soon as he had enough food for the day, he would return home. After returning, he would close the door and diligently practice on his own. He had lived this way for many years. He was also very happy in his heart. Later, an official heard that this person was quite accomplished in his practice. So he specifically went to find this person. He said, "Your practice is indeed commendable. Your life is very difficult. Let me give you some money to help you repair your house. In the future, I can also provide you with some necessities, including rice and food I can supply you." The beggar thought for a moment. He said, "Thank you very much, but I am unwilling. I do not wish to indulge in too many pleasures. Having enough is sufficient for me, as it always has been. I live my life in this way now, and for the rest of my life I will continue to live like this." In the end, he lived his life in this manner. When he finally passed away, all kinds of auspicious signs appeared as well. It even caused quite a stir in the local city. So sometimes I think, actually, when we encounter such situations, even though we are not beggars, if we meet a big boss, so someone like that, in such a case, "In the future I want to renovate your house. I want to change your life," or buy you a lot of things, for example. We don't know if you'd say, "Oh, there's no need. I still prefer to live my own life as I do now. A rather simple and contented life, enjoying simplicity and virtue. Being content brings constant happiness. That's enough for me. If I had more, I might get more distracted. If I had wealth, I might end up thinking about it every day. In the end, my spiritual practice would be interrupted." Indeed, sometimes when we read the Buddhist scriptures, on one hand, the contents seem very simple. This is the teaching of the first turning of the Dharma wheel. It seems that there's nothing complicated about it. But on the other hand, some of the stories are also very moving. Sometimes we seem inferior to even an animal. Animals have a certain strength. They can climb out of the mud on their own. Take a beggar, for example. He still has his own principles. Every day, even his alms seeking is done with a certain restraint. He doesn't go overboard. "How much do I get today? How much will I get tomorrow?" Yesterday, in that little wooden house of mine, there were a lot of water buckets. I threw them all away, thinking I was accumulating more and more things. What I threw away were just water buckets, not anything big. But sometimes this is also symbolic. I personally feel that this means I've seen through it, at least after throwing away all 7 broken water buckets. I felt a bit more comfortable. Indeed, when many of us look at ourselves, it seems like, because everyone is young and the environment, plus with the internet and all sorts of other reasons these days, maybe our bodies, minds and values have all completely shifted somewhere else. At this point, the things we originally had, the things that are so precious in Buddhism, basically seem to not matter much to us anymore. A lot of young people now, when it comes to concepts like compassion or emptiness in Buddhism, they haven't experienced them for themselves. If they haven't experienced, they simply won't care about them. What might be even more important for them is that, wow, in this world nowadays, where are the stars? Where can I get online? Nowadays, on one hand, for those who know a bit about Chinese, Tibetan or English, can do some volunteer work. They shouldn't be too strictly confined to diligence alone. It's not like I have to be just like an old monk, shut away in a room, never seeing anyone again. That might not be realistic either. But if you want to do it, sometimes there really are a lot of things to do. When you do things, if you have generated genuine bodhicitta, others cannot see this inner motivation. If you have bodhicitta and the intention to benefit others, then you can do many things. It doesn't matter if others slander you or talk about you. But if deep down you have no real practice and no intention to benefit others, then no matter what you do, it probably isn't very good. So on one hand, perhaps all of us, especially now as we keep up with the times in the internet era, there may be many things that need to be done in Buddhism. Now there's something called AI video translation, which is really quite useful. I also mentioned it briefly the other day. If we don't make use of it in this era, it would be a bit of a pity. You see, when we teach the Dharma now, if we can put it online, many people will know about it. Even if I can't go online using my current lecture. For example, I taught the way of the Bodhisattva before, but through AI technology, much of the content in my videos can remain unchanged, but the method and language can be completely changed. And in a short amount of time, you can translate it into 70 or 80 different languages now. In the future, Tibetan should also be translatable in this way. Right now, it still can't handle everything. Some words don't work yet. English, French, German, Japanese, including Spanish and Russian. These languages are very easy to translate right now. The conversion is very easy. So whether we're going online or doing and learning these things, our minds must not get caught up in meaningless distractions. But if we can control our minds and do a bit in this area, things that were impossible to accomplish for many years in the past can now be achieved in a very short time. So, as a scientist once said, this is the best of times and also the worst of times. Most people may not be able to control their bodies and minds, which is quite frightening. But for a certain group of people, this is a great opportunity. So, when it comes to volunteer work, how do we maintain control? On one hand, we don't let ourselves fall into degeneration. And on the other hand, by relying on the convenient methods available now, we can benefit sentient beings, even if just a little. Plus, with our Buddhist teachings, didn't we talk about this the other day? Those senior practitioners from earlier generations, they established practice centers in such places. They were truly remarkable. But nowadays, many of us, when it comes to building practice centers, seem to lack the ability. There are indeed some objective reasons for this. But sometimes, if we have the aspiration in the future, there should be opportunities. Including on the women's side, I've also noticed that recently some have been teaching and giving Dharma talks at practice centers outside. It seems that back when they were in our academy, some of them had a lot of promise. But after leaving, they became especially lazy, which is quite disappointing. Some were rather mischievous at that time, and it seemed like they wouldn't listen or accomplish much. But in the end, they kept giving teachings continuously, and many people have benefited greatly from them. So, within each of our own streams of consciousness, what kind of seeds and habitual tendencies are hidden there, roughly speaking? We may not be able to see it now, but over time. As the saying goes, distance tests a horse's strength, and time reveals a person's true nature. Gradually, we will know what is stored in your alaya consciousness. Whether a monastic or lay person, truly even now, no matter when, you quietly study on your own, and quietly spread the authentic Dharma to those around you. In fact, the Dharma really can transform oneself, transform families, transform society, and transform the whole world. Even if it can't change the whole world, it can still change some people. In the past, His Holiness also said, when I make aspirations, there are several levels. The best is to change the hearts of people all over the world. If that's not possible, then at least those in China. If that's still not possible, then at least the mindset of the people in Tibetan areas should change. Actually, this is a great aspiration. Within the framework of such a great aspiration, we should also learn. We must not spend every day just thinking about very simple things like eating, drinking, and sleeping. If that's the case, apart from animals, even animals, aside from these things, do not have any higher values. So we still need to, on one hand, gradually cultivate an altruistic mind, because there really are some people who slowly change their mindset through education. If you truly have altruism in your heart, if you truly have the Dharma, then the simple matters of birth, aging, sickness, and death will seem trivial and insignificant to you. But if there is nothing in your heart, then even if you become a Khenpo or a Khenmo, no matter if you are a Tulku, a Lama, or a Geshe, no matter how many of these kinds of titles you have, in reality, they are all meaningless. So regarding this verse, there are actually many more principles that could be discussed. In short, everyone should reflect on this gradually. In this life or future lives, helping ourselves and all beings find happiness. That's practice, that's Dharma. Let's stop here.
Sonandai tamsa thobaya tonani de dhamma pasi tirgana jirano chupai chupun sonen droja
Bandangara Badna Sūtra Bandangara Badna Sūtra Bandangara Badna Sūtra